all. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us at short notice this morning. My name is Nicholas Reid from Reid Corporate, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to this special investor webinar on behalf of Chalice Mining. We've had huge interest in this webinar this morning with over 400 registered. And it's been a big 24 hours for Chalice, to say the least. Yesterday, the company announced that initial drilling at the Dampier target, 10 kilometres north of its Gonneville deposit here in WA, had intersected a new nickel-copper-PGE sulfide zone, highlighting the enormous potential along the 30-kilometre-long Julimar intrusive complex. And this morning, the company has unveiled a significant increase and upgrade in the mineral resource estimate for the world-class Gonneville deposit itself. Joining us live from the Chalice boardroom in West Perth this morning, we have the company's Managing Director and CEO, Alex Dorsch, to give us a detailed update on these important announcements. Joining Alex, to the right of him on the screen as you look at the webinar browser, is the company's General Manager, Discovery and Growth, Dr. Kevin Frost, and to Alex's left, Matthew Demmer, Lead Geologist. The format for this morning's webinar is as follows. Alex will step us through the presentation before opening the floor to questions. And given that we have a significant part of the Chalice Brains Trust available to us this morning, can I encourage everyone listening to use the Q&A tab on your webinar browser to fire in your questions so I can put them to Alex, Kevin and Matt. A quick note that a copy of this morning's presentation has been lodged on the ASX platform, and you can follow the synchronized slides on your webinar browser as Alex and the team present. Finally, a recording of this webinar will be available later today and will be posted on all of our socials, the company's website, and distributed via email. Thank you very much, everyone, for your attendance this morning. Alex, good morning. Congratulations to you and the team on these exciting new milestones. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Nick, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining. It has been a very big 24 hours for Chalice, so obviously great to see the levels of interest in Chalice and the evolving Julemar story. As Nick alluded to, I guess, if anyone was in doubt of, the potential of this new part of Western Australia to deliver material new discoveries, I think our updates in the last 24 hours have reaffirmed that. So I'll take you through, some of those updates, and then we'll do some Q&A as Nick said. So our usual forward-looking statements and competent person disclosures. This has obviously been lodged on the ASX, so I encourage everyone to read that in their own time. So to introduce the company for those who are new to Chalice, we are a globally recognised name in exploration now. That's because we've got people who have found mines and not only done that, but also rewarded shareholders. Our DNA, as it says there, is the mine finding. We're not interested in technical successes. We're interested in commercial successes. And really our purpose as a company is to find these critical metals needed to decarbonise the world. So really we have a high level of ambition in the company. So we've got the beginnings of a world-class multi-district green metals province. And that is what we're all about. We're creating a new province for Western Australia and for the country. So a quick bit on Chalice as a company. Obviously, we our shareholders on the top left there. Tim Goyder, the founder of the company, remains our largest shareholder at 10%. Board and management listed on the left-hand side there. Importantly, we did raise recently $100 million at $6 a share. So our cash balance and our balance sheet is in very good shape, sitting with about 140 million Australian dollars. So that really gives us the ability to really do justice to all the work that is going on at the moment. There has been a period of weakness across the board, across markets, and we have suffered through that. But surely I think people are now appreciating the level of opportunity out there that Chalice provides, and currently today sitting around 1.5 billion in market cap with 376 million shares on issue. So Julimar, as most would know, is a major new critical minerals project in Western Australia. This morning we updated the mineral resource of the first discovery on the project. That's now based on 775 drill holes. The previous resource was based on 530 drill holes, so an additional 235 drill holes that have upgraded the resource, as Nick mentioned, to 350 million tonnes, 0.58% nickel equivalent and 1.8 grams per tonne palladium equivalent. Importantly here, most of the drilling has been focused on infill, so we've seen not only a significant increase in the indicated category, but also a very robust grades. So we haven't seen any deterioration of grades really from infill work, and that's resulted in a roughly 6% increase in the contained metal to 11 million ounces of precious metals, 560,000 tonnes of contained nickel, 360,000 tonnes of contained copper, 54,000 tonnes of contained cobalt. So a very polymetallic deposit, a very unique thing in today's world, equivalent now to 20 million ounce palladium deposit or a 2 million tonne equivalent nickel deposit. But importantly, a high grade, our high grade part of that resource has increased as well by 11%. So up from 74 million tonnes to 82 million tonnes at roughly 1% nickel equivalent or 2.9 grams per tonne palladium equivalent. Importantly there, that high grade part of the resource starts from a depth of 30 metres and extends to a depth that's wide open at 700 metres below surface. So still a number of step out programs yet to come. About 90 assays, 90 holes of with assays pending. So a lot of I guess resource to grow, growth to come at Gonneville there. But already clearly a strategic large scale resource with a very rare mix of critical minerals. Obviously the PGEs in combination with nickel, copper, cobalt, a very, very attractive mix of metals for decarbonisation technologies like batteries, electric vehicles and hydrogen. So the world is in desperate need to increase its endowment and increase its output of these metals. And this is sitting right on the doorstep of Perth in one of the most attractive mining jurisdictions in the world. So a very, very attractive proposition. Our strategy here has been consistent from the get-go. We've spoken about the level of upside along the new Julimar intrusive complex. I guess whilst we test that upside and whilst we systematically explore this complex, we're looking at Gonneville as a potential starter mine. So I guess we're moving studies ahead rapidly to understand Gonneville. And Gonneville as a standalone proposition is looking very attractive given that it has direct access to infrastructure as well as the large, very competent mining workforce of Perth. So a very significant amount of upside as we established yesterday, which I'll get to. We've got 4 rigs drilling along the Julimar complex, effectively still on totally greenfield targets, and 3 rigs continuing work at the Gonneville resource. So the Gonneville resource, I guess it's a rare tier 1 scale, shallow discovery, and it has compelling optionality and growth potential. You can see the individual grades there. I guess there has been some growth in that resource pit shell, as you see there on the page, still approximately 1.9 kilometres in strike length, but the resource pit has deepened to about 600 metres at its deepest point, and that's resulted in some growth in contained metal, and as I mentioned, still, as you can see there, open from a depth of 700 metres, as well as open to the north along the strike length. The higher grade part of the resource I mentioned, the 82 million tonnes, a very robust and a very attractive proposition given that this part of the resource starts at such a shallow depth. We have put a little bit of growth on that high grade part of the resource, but as you can see again with the open arrows, there's multiple potential underground lenses of higher grade mineralisation that need to be drilled further. And that is going to unfold and continue to unfold, as I said, with the 3 rigs drilling on Gonneville. I think that as I mentioned, the important part and the important de-risking step of the last sort of 7 months worth of drilling at Gonneville has really been focused on moving the confidence level from inferred to indicated. So our maiden resource back in November had approximately 45% of the tonnes in indicated category. Now we have 70% of the total. And as you can see there, the shallow part of the resource above a depth of about 300 metres, as you can see there, is largely now indicated category. So that provides a very strong foundation and obviously allows us to progress our scoping study and really complete our optimisation work and be in a position to report that scoping study later this quarter. This is probably, I guess, a good gives the audience a good snapshot of the level of growth potential just at Gonneville here alone. The first thing to note there is that you can see where the Julimar State Forest boundary is on the left-hand side of the page. Not only is mineralisation open to the north, but the actual Gonneville intrusion itself is open to the north and is still 500 to 600 metres thick at that point. So it is a very large accumulation of metals in a very large host intrusion already. But as you can see there, there's about 800 metres of plunge extent to the high-grade mineralisation there that still needs to be exploited. So that's why we've got 2 rigs drilling deeper holes, 1 RC rig continuing on infill, and that's really aiming to really determine the overall scale of just the Gonneville system. But obviously, for those who've been paying attention, the Gonneville system does not look like the end of the story here for this exciting mineral complex. We did provide an update this morning as well as part of the resource. We have used new economic parameters and new technical parameters to constrain not only the new resource pit shell, but also constrain mineable shapes underground. So again, we're continuing work on 2 fronts on processing. We're looking at part of the resource for selective copper and nickel flotation, producing 2 separate metal concentrates for sale. So we think that is an obvious starting point for the project. And then as you move into the lower grade part of the resource, we've really started to think carefully about what is the next stage of processing that we feel is appropriate, given the growing endowment of metal that we have there at Gonneville. Obviously, it's becoming incredibly important to optimise the recovery and maximise the value add that we can achieve at the mine. So obviously, we're looking at a number of different technologies to achieve that. I guess the most promising one of those is basically enriching the nickel concentrate, doing some additional processing on that, and then that allows us to separate the nickel and cobalt away from copper and PGEs, and the copper and PGEs go together and get blended with the copper concentrate, which we believe is very robust at lower grades, and that basically allows us the nickel and cobalt to be sold potentially directly to a battery manufacturer. So that's a very promising area of work that's ongoing. We do have more work to be done to really continue to optimise this and work out the parameters on both flowsheet options. And that is likely to evolve over the next few years. The reality is that mineral deposits like this, which are polymetallic, they do take some time to get a full understanding of. But basically, this is a very promising sign that we've got 2 potential avenues here to market and a growing understanding of mineralogy and metallurgy to achieve that. So an update provided today on expectations as well around metallurgical recoveries, and those are obviously subject to ongoing work as well, particularly in relation to nickel, cobalt, and the corresponding PGE recoveries into nickel concentrate. I guess the Gonneville, as I mentioned, though, is just a small part of the Julimar story. I guess the 2% of the complex that we have drilled out has resulted in a very large scale discovery at Gonneville and a very large scale resource now. But as you can see there in the bottom left-hand page, it is wide open to the north. We've said for some time now that all the indications are sort of growing and aligning that this 30-kilometre belt, this 30-kilometre package of mafic, ultramafic geology really has the potential to deliver further discoveries. And it's very pleasing and very exciting, obviously, yesterday to announce, I guess, the first evidence of a really new wide zone of sulfide mineralisation that we've intersected there at the Dampier target, which, looking at the scale of this figure here, just to remind people, that's 10 kilometres along the strike length from Gonneville. So the 10-kilometre gap, obviously, we're still doing a lot of drilling on. We have, really just begun to really understand, what the Hartog Dampier targets will hold, and only about 8 holes drilled to date at Hartog, and 3 only at Dampier. But the 3 that we have got at Dampier are certainly giving us a new level of excitement around the potential for that area. So now zooming in on the Dampier area, it's roughly in the middle of the Julimar complex, in the middle of the Julimar State Forest. As I mentioned, it's a wide new zone of mineralised ultramafic rocks, 10 kilometres northeast of Gonneville, that basically all 3 holes have intersected. So the geology here that we've seen, the ultramafic, mafic intrusive rocks and the sulfide assemblage we've seen is very, very similar to what we see at Gonneville. This is really the first time we've seen Gonneville-like geology and Gonneville-like sulfide mineralisation outside of Gonneville itself. But we do have a lot of assays pending here to really work out the real economic significance of this new zone. As you can see there on the figure on the left-hand side and on the section on the right-hand side, what makes us particularly encouraged at this point is that the intersection points into this zone are 350 metres apart along the strike, and 250 metres apart in dip extent. So it does look like something that of very promising interest, and that zone as well, as you can see on the left-hand side, corresponds with roughly a kilometre long magnetic feature that has a coincident nickel and chrome response in soil. So it is highlighting, I guess, that we are in the right place. We are getting very strong evidence now that the geophysics and the soil are really putting us in the right place to make new discoveries. And then, I guess, zooming out, I guess the big picture, I guess, here is probably worth noting that these early results have, like I said, really highlighted the prospectivity of the elsewhere along the Julimar complex. We've got 4 rigs drilling in that 10 kilometres of strike length between Gonneville and Dampier. We're mobilising a 2nd rig up to the Dampier target. We've got 2 rigs working at Hartog, and now we've got a rig mobilising as well to the very attractive Hahn and Hamlin targets at the northern end of Hartog as well. So as you note there from the figure, Hahn and Hamlin, we've got more than 2 high priority EM plates now to test, some of them coincident with chrome and nickel anomalism in soils, exactly what we've seen at Dampier. So they have been very much elevated in priority. And as I said, a rig will begin drilling on those 2 targets very, very, very soon in the next few days. We're also now have materially upgraded, I guess, the strike length of the Julimar complex heading northeast. So as you can see there, the Bodan target also has coincident mag, coincident nickel, chrome, and also copper in some areas, which upgrades the prospectivity of that area materially as well. So we still have some work to do there on moving loop EM, and we are waiting on access to do drilling in that area. But as you can see, we do have an area of farmland in the middle of the state forest that we have an access agreement with to do drilling. So we will have the ability to drill a number of holes from that farmland targeted at Dampier and potentially Bodan as well. So lots of work to do, and certainly we have re-rated, I guess, this part of the Julimar complex in terms of prospectivity. So I guess before I wrap up for questions, I guess, the company and the team at Chalice has really delivered consistency as to what we've said Since the Julimar discovery in March of 2020, we've now upgraded the Gonneville resource. And the next steps on the right-hand side there, really, we're looking at progressing Gonneville towards a mine development whilst we really complete that first plus of exploration, not only along the Julimar complex, but outside of that on our 8,000 square kilometres of effectively untested West Yilgarn licence. The Julimar project is an important one for Western Australia. It's an important one strategically for Australia. Really, it has the potential to develop to generate significant economic benefits to the region, and we are committed to making sure that our impact is minimised, our impact on the environment. We're using very low impact techniques to drill in the Julimar State Forest. We are not doing any mechanised clearing of any trees or any significant vegetation, and we're really doing all the things that you would expect a modern mining company to do to demonstrate that commitment. We're also having a meaningful impact on the region already, and that's likely to grow materially as we move towards mine development. Zooming back from Julimar, I know a lot of people have heard us and me in particular talk about the potential of the West Yilgarn now for some time. It's worth reiterating that the East Yilgarn, in terms of nickel endowment, it really transpired over sort of 7 to 20 years. So starting in 1965 with the Kambalda discovery, that over the course of the next 7 years, around about 13 million tonnes of nickel was discovered in and around the eastern goldfields there in the Kalgoorlie-Canalpi nickel province. We've got a totally untested part of Western Australia here that obviously Gonneville has really now elevated in priority for not only ourselves but for the industry. And we've made obviously the first material discovery of nickel-copper-PGEs in the area. We've got the advantage in that we've staked all the prospective area. We've got hundreds of potential targets to test over this 1,200 kilometre long belt or province, and really we know our exploration approach works. That's one of the key things. It's a very effective exploration approach we're using, and it's also very low cost. And really, what we may find in this West Yilgarn over the course of the next decade will be very, very interesting to see unfold. But certainly, what we've established is that the Julimar complex is a very, very exciting start to the West Yilgarn province as a whole. So I'll pause in a minute, but to summarise, I guess Gonneville alone is a world-class resource. It's got the right mix of commodities for a decarbonising world. We've got a significant amount of exploration upside, and we're really just beginning the journey here in the West Yilgarn. I've got some of the best explorationists in the world working in the Chalice team. We're a high-performance team. We're very, very driven to success. We're also well-funded, like I said, with approximately 140 million in cash. So we've got the desire and the intent here to really interrogate the opportunity that really you don't see come around very often. So on that note, Nicholas, I'll pass over for some questions.
Thanks very much, Alex. Great run through as always. Just a reminder to everyone listening, please use the Q&A tab. We've got a number of questions already, but fire them in and we'll put them to the guys in the Chalice boardroom there. Alex, before we start with the webinar questions, I might just start with a broad one because a lot of people have been asking and texting me just to get a feel from you and the team as to how excited you are about what you've seen at Dampier. Do you consider it to be a discovery yet? And what would you need to see before you call it as such?
We are a technically and commercially driven company. So, we haven't said that Dampier is as yet a discovery. I think what we've seen is a very, very promising indication of the ability of the complex there to generate high-grade sulfide mineralisation. We've confirmed that, but yeah, as yet, it's not a discovery. We'll wait till we obviously see something and confirm something of economic significance before we do that, consistent with what transpired, I guess, over the first couple of months after the discovery hole at Gonneville. But certainly, and I guess maybe Kevin can comment on what his thoughts are about the prospectivity of the area. But I think, the levels of excitement in the company, safe to say, have gone up to a high degree. over the last few days, but I'll let Kevin give his thoughts.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Alex. I guess the key for us, Nick, is that we're seeing very similar geology to what we see at Gonneville. And I think that's, with any of the sort of step out information that we get, confirmation of geology is paramount for discovering more of these types of deposits. We've seen a lot of disseminated sulphide, see a big halo above what we think is the base of that intrusion, where we're seeing the high sulphide abundances consistent with observed pentlandite, chalcopyrite, as well as the pyrrhotite right through that system. So, very, very good signs. Early signs, of course, but that's I guess the basis for our release at this stage. Of course, we're waiting for assays, but as we've seen from the adjacent holes, we're definitely seeing elevated PGEs. Again, very similar to what we see in the broad, lower grade disseminated zones around the G zones back at Gonneville.
Fantastic. We'll dive into the questions and I'll just sort of work through them top to bottom. The first question here is from Des Moriarty. He says, Caspian has successfully assayed for rhodium. Are you looking at the same?
Thanks, Des. Yes, we are looking to assay for rhodium, particularly the new hole 13 at Dampier. We have noted, I guess, the elevated levels of rhodium around about 40 kilometres. Bear in mind, 40 kilometres to the north of where we've hit mineralisation there at Dampier. So I guess these systems can deliver varying metal ratios and varying metal content depending on the pressure temperature regime at the time of emplacement and a host of other factors. So yes, we are keeping an eye out for the other PGEs outside of platinum and palladium. But yeah, as yet, in Gonneville, I guess what we have established is that there's relatively low levels of rhodium and certainly not enough of significance to make anything of economic significance. But yeah, I think the development at Yarrawinda, is a promising sign that what we have been saying for some time around the metal ratios in these deposits can be quite variable. That appears to be playing out over the province.
Excellent. Next question here is from Ryan Harrington. He's relatively new to mining, so he asks if you can just give us a quick explanation of indicated and inferred, and perhaps with respect to the resource, perhaps if you could explain for the benefit of shareholders what the significance of having 70% indicated would mean.
Sure. So I guess there's three levels of geological confidence in resources, from in order of increasing significance, inferred, indicated, and measured. And we obviously started with the resource in approximately 45% indicated, 55% inferred. Inferred resources can't convert into reserve until they have been upgraded in geological confidence by further drilling. So we've basically started, we know our drill hole spacing to get inferred resources is around about 80 metres between holes. To get indicated resources, it's around about 40 to 50 metres. So I guess that in simple terms, we're upgrading the confidence level of the continuity and grade and quality of the deposit. And that will allow, I guess, indicated resources will eventually be converted into reserves subject to, I guess, mining factors and other modifying factors being applied. It's worth noting as well, though, that reserve conversion and maiden reserves won't be reported until we've completed a pre-feasibility study, which at this stage is still sort of 12 to 18 months away.
Excellent. The next question from Damo Wood, apart from congratulating you on getting MRE2 out on time, he asks, will there be an MRE3 to include those extra 90-hole assays, including some of the excellent results released in May? If so, when? Thanks very much.
So yes, we do have 90 holes pending. A number of those holes are infill, and I guess continuing to infill the areas of inferred resources. So not all of those have been drilled outside of the resource. But in short, we will I guess monitor the results and work out, I guess, at what point there's a material or likely to be a material increase or upgrade of the resource. So I think, you know, it's been now, I guess, just over 8 months since we released our maiden resource. So I guess that gives you maybe an insight into the sort of the frequency of updates. But I guess they're really driven by the materiality and significance of the drilling. So every hole we drill, we obviously, you know, look at that and model that and work out, you know, I guess any potential change and any materiality of that.
Thanks, Alex. The next question is from Peter Rayner. He says, an analyst has commented that a key risk for the Julimar project overall is metallurgy, as the company has yet to demonstrate a flow sheet that can produce industry standard concentrate grades at the global resource head grade for its nickel-PGE concentrate stream. Can you please provide your view on this? Thank you.
Yeah, so look, there's a few points to mention there. I think the first is that you know, we're really sort of only 18 months into what is likely to be a 5-year, you know, journey to get the metallurgy optimized and obviously, you know, fully understood, particularly in complex mineral systems like orthomagmatic systems like Gonneville. These are some of the most complicated, you know, styles of mineralization and that you see, you know, anywhere in the world, but typically they do evolve quickly in terms of mineralogical understanding and metallurgical understanding. If you look at other, you know, mineral complexes where there's orthomagmatic style mineralization like this, like Sudbury, Raglan, Jinchuan, Norilsk, those are all mineral complexes that transpired and, you know, really evolved over decades, you know, following the discovery. So, you know, I think to think that, you know, we can just immediately have the answer and know exactly how to process the minerals we have within a short time frame is probably fairly unrealistic. There's a lot of work and a lot of expertise being applied to the mineralogy first and foremost, and then to the metallurgy to work out, you know, what are the optimal flow sheets or flow sheets. So that the other point to mention there is, you know, I guess there are multiple alternative pathways to market. So whilst you know, typical smaller scale nickel sulfide discoveries in Western Australia have typically, you know, chosen a flotation to concentrate and an export of that concentrate to get to market. Clearly, in terms of metal endowment here and in terms of the array of minerals in this deposit, clearly we have a lot more work to do, and it's a lot you know, obviously the endowment justifies looking at you know, more value capture not only at the mine site but potentially also locally. That's an area that the government of Western Australia and the Commonwealth are obviously very keen to support us doing. I guess you know, so there's a range of possibilities that are all being worked up. What we have, you know, updated the market today with is a degree of confidence around the two flow sheets in terms of the metal recoveries, but certainly don't take that as the be all and end all. We haven't yet published a scoping study, and obviously that scoping study is really looking in the next level of detail at those flow sheets and processing options, and we'll continue to work on that and no doubt continue to improve our understanding and improve metallurgical outcomes over time.
Thanks, Alex. The next question is a fairly detailed one on the resource from Michael Pocock. He says tonnes and nickel equivalent are up approximately 5%. Palladium equivalent looks higher. Splitting out metals, it seems like gold and contained copper is the main increase. What's driving this? Also, it looks like metal price assumptions have moved, especially for nickel, cobalt and copper. What's driving that change, please?
Maybe I'll comment on some of the changes on the economic side, and then Matt can comment around, you know, some of the, I guess, recent drilling targeting some you know, richer copper zones. the metal equivalent calculations have changed according to two things. So the consensus long-term price deck has been updated to the 2025 consensus. Last year we used the 2024 consensus. So we have, moved with, as analyst forecasts have moved on the price deck. It's worth cautioning that, the price deck that's applied to a resource is obviously much different to a price deck that's applied to a reserve. So the resource here, we're trying to take a long-term view on what might be a multi-decade type of operation and a significant resource base. So that's the first point, that has been updated in the metal equivalent calculation. The other thing that's been updated, there's been some minor tweaks to metal recoveries, and we've used approximated or rounded figures for metal recoveries in the new metal equivalent calculations. So that has had a minor impact on the old nickel equivalent calculation versus the new nickel equivalent calculation, but it's really not particularly material. And maybe Matt can comment on sort of where the resource growth has come from in terms of copper and slight upgrade in terms of copper contained metal and gold.
So with copper, for those of you who followed Gonneville for a little while, a lot of the copper-rich zone is within the G4, which sits on the base of the intrusion. We've completed a lot more drilling in that area along the base and also to the south of the intrusion, which has a lot of the G4 material. So that's where a lot of the copper is coming from. Also towards the central and northern area of the intrusion, we've completed a lot more infill drilling, and we're beginning to find that we can follow another lens down at depth in that area, and that also has more of a copper component to it.
Thanks very much. I might just slip in a sort of a related question that's been texted to me from an investor here in Perth, Alex. He says that given that this was a polymetallic deposit, lots of metals to think about, how do you think the market should value the stock, and what methodology should people use?
Look, it's a very good question, and I certainly sympathise with those looking outside in and those analysts out there trying to comprehend what we have. So look, it is a complex basket of metals. There's probably two comments I'll make. The first point is, obviously we haven't published a scoping study yet for Gonneville, which is obviously, what we view as the starting point for the project. So, until we do, publish a scoping study, there is a higher degree of uncertainty around all the key variables and key inputs. And then I think secondly, you have to think about the rarity of this discovery in the context of, where the global commodities market is. There's a lot of companies that are chasing the metals that we found here, and all of them are obviously looking for the unique characteristics of sulfide metallurgy, safe jurisdiction, and obviously no better place to find something than Western Australia. They're looking also for that scale. So, we've got a really special asset from that perspective if you think about in terms of scarcity pricing. And look, our view is, that the commodities, the level of growth in production of commodities like nickel, palladium, cobalt, copper, the level of production growth that needs to be achieved to achieve net zero decarbonisation outcomes are truly extraordinary, right? So the outlook for those metals is very, very good, and that certainly adds a degree of optionality to the value of lower grade material at Gonneville. So whilst there's a very attractive proposition in the higher grade part of Gonneville, there's also a lot of metal there that, in a more optimistic set of commodity prices suddenly becomes of significant economic interest potentially. So I think that's the lens I would take, and the other key thing obviously to reiterate is that, now that we know what we know about Dampier, we're certainly getting indications here that Gonneville is just the starting point in terms of the total endowment of this region. So I guess, there obviously needs to be a long-term view applied to the likelihood of further exploration success. And obviously, that's what the company is really focused on, rather than getting too obsessed about sort of what we have today. I think we're taking a lens that, that there's really watch this space and let the drilling really transpire to define, what the true scale of this mineral system is.
It's a nice segue into the next question, which is from Calvin Fox. He says, can you summarise your exploration methodology? I'm guessing he's referring to your targeting process within the broader Julimar complex outside of Gonneville.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I guess our approach has been a multi-pronged approach. Obviously, moving into the state forest, we went ahead with non-ground disturbing type techniques. So very low impact there. Airborne geophysics is very important for our approach. So very early on, it was almost 12 months ago now, we flew an airborne EM survey that covered the majority of that Julimar complex, and that's generated a whole range of targets there, which we then go onto the ground to do our ground geophysics, our ground EM. And that gives us definitive plates, which are, the conductors that we're obviously testing with drilling. And then, so those are known from airborne and ground surveys. Then we've gone through and done a sweep there with soil geochemistry. Again, it's a very cheap and easily applied technique. And then obviously we try and use the geophysics and the geochemistry together to give us our range of targets. Obviously, depending on the priorities, now we've seen what we've done at Dampier. All of a sudden, we're re-rating a lot of targets just along strike because they have EM plates, they have soil geochemistry. So I guess you're always just trying to look for the balance there of what works, and that's what we found, works for our approach.
And I think the approach constantly evolves as well. Like it adapts to new information on the fly. So yeah, I guess as to reiterate what Kevin said there about Dampier, this is a big learning, not only about what mineralisation is there at Dampier, but what other targets are now attractive in the context of that learning. So this is that iterative process that the team follows, and certainly we've got one of the largest, most capable exploration teams anywhere in the country at the moment, or indeed anywhere in the world. So I'm very confident that if it's there, the team will find it, and because we've got such effective, we've demonstrated that we're very effective at finding.
Absolutely, thanks for that. Next question is from Howard Elson. He says, when will Chalice need additional equity capital? You obviously raised pretty recently, so very well timed as well, I might say.
Yes, so we did raise $100 million back in May. That we said sort of covers us for 18 months worth of forecast expenditure. We're certainly not envisaging any immediate need for capital for a long time. We are also getting interest or significant levels of interest from strategic type partners, which we're evaluating as well. So I guess we as shareholders ourselves, we don't like diluting shareholders. We've got a level of exploration upside in the company that we don't want to dilute shareholders' exposure to if we don't have to. So that's the approach we continue to take on that front, and certainly we're well funded to be drilling in that Julimar State Forest along the complex, as well as doing all those studies at Gonneville for the near future.
Thanks, Alex. Question here from Mark Leather. He says, why is Chalice not drilling in the state forest immediately next to Gonneville to see if the deposit extends there?
Thanks, Mark. We are drilling immediately north of Gonneville as well. So remembering we have 4 rigs drilling across that 10 kilometres of strike length. So one rig at the moment is drilling, I guess, in that first kilometre to the north of Gonneville. A second rig, like I said, is mobilising to the Hamelin-Hahn area. And then obviously we've got a rig at Dampier, which has just completed that hole 13, and an additional rig is joining that up that end at the Dampier target. So as always, it's based on results and prioritisation. We are looking around the market as well for additional rigs and people, but I guess the market is tight still in Western Australia for both of those things. So we'll look to ramp up exploration pace according to results, and certainly in terms of drilling directly north of Gonneville and at Hartog. The thing to reiterate is that it's a 7 kilometre long area. So 8 holes completed to date over 7 kilometres is just not even scratching the surface. So we've got a long way to go yet before we really understand what that first 7 kilometres north of Gonneville looks like.
Thanks, Alex. We have had a couple of questions from people listening in around the state forest, and you've got a low impact exploration campaign underway there at the moment. You've received all the approvals for that. Can you just talk to your thinking about how, as the project evolves, the future of mining, I guess, in that area?
Yeah, sure. No, I think that's a good point. Look, I guess the first thing to mention is, as a company, we don't want to have any impact or unnecessary impact. So I guess we've demonstrated a commitment to keep our impact down through the exploration phase by staging the activities, and then obviously looking at smaller footprint, reducing our footprint over time. I guess there's a couple of points in relation to the history of the Julimar State Forest. The first point is obviously the area that we're drilling on at the moment, from Hartog to Dampier, is within an existing mining license or a mining state agreement. So that does allow for the extraction of bauxite minerals in that area already. And obviously we have the license to everything other than bauxite in that area. And then I guess secondly, the history of that state forest, whilst we appreciate there is very high conservation values and very high recreational use and recreational value in that area, what we think is, I guess small scale, discrete deposits or discrete, mining activities through that state forest is overwhelmingly a positive for not only the environment, but also the region and the state. The world is in, like I said, in desperate need for responsibly sourced metals like what we have there at Julimar. And I guess that those metals have a huge decarbonisation impact. So I guess the extraction of these metals has a big contribution towards climate change. So it's a very important endeavour. And unfortunately, the metals just aren't found everywhere. These types of accumulations are incredibly rare. There's sort of under a dozen similar types of mineral complexes like Julimar in the world. So I think that we have a strong commitment. We are very confident in the ability to get a mine obviously permitted at Gonneville, and any potential discovery in that Julimar State Forest. We're also very confident that there's a pathway there to have a modern green metals mine that obviously, as I said, overwhelmingly has a net positive impact.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. The next question is from John Mesrobian. He says, Alex, what's the monthly burn rate? 140 million in cash. How long will that carry you before you need to return to the market to raise money?
Yeah, no, thanks, John. It fluctuates between about $4 and $6 million a month. So we're obviously not sitting on our laurels here. This is a high degree of exploration expenditure. We've got lots of drill rigs, lots of work going on over the province as shareholders expect us to do. And that, as I said, leaves us in very, very good shape for the next sort of 18 months. Like I said, about 140 million in cash at the end of May. So I guess, we're very well funded. And to reiterate the point around, there is other alternative sources of funding that are becoming available to us as well, potentially, that we're investigating as well.
Thank you. Next question from Kingsley Lee. How soon will Chalice be looking for offtake agreements?
That's a good question. Look, I think typically offtake agreements are made at the earliest sort of by a pre-feasibility study, and certainly, I guess, during the process of obtaining financing and making a final investment decision on a project. So some years away from where we are today. There is a strong level of interest, I guess, somewhat related to the other question around metallurgy. There's a strong level of interest in particularly our nickel sulfide concentrate that we've discussed with a whole range of parties in Asia, Europe, as well as North America. So there is already a very strong interest in that product, and copper. Our copper product is also very attractive to a whole range of copper smelters. Obviously, there's numerous copper smelters that are very interested and very much capable of giving us attractive offtake. So we don't see a requirement today to commit any of our potential production to an offtake, but certainly there's a high degree of interest for both products.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alex. We've got time for probably a couple more questions before we wrap up. Graham Jenke asks, do the EM conductors always correspond to areas of higher grade mineralisation?
We'd like to think so, but no, we've obviously, from our very early exploration at Gonneville, we found that there are sulfidic sediments sitting on the basal contact, the eastern contact of the intrusion. So, of course, anything with appreciable pyrrhotite in will generate a EM response. So, yeah, we've definitely got a mix there of sediments in the package, which, again, is actually viewed as a positive indicator there for prospectivity. Sulfidic sediments very likely to be contributing sulfur to these systems. So it's the usual, I guess, some good and some bad about having, a mix of sulfidic sediments in a geological succession. But the short answer is no.
And I think maybe to reiterate the point as well on, not having an EM response does not mean that there's no mineralisation. What we've demonstrated over and over at Gonneville is that really Gonneville broadly has some, localised EM responses, but broadly it really has a very, very subtle, if not negligible, EM response in areas. So that I guess, that needs to be taken into consideration when you look at the EM response over the Julimar complex. The other point to note as well is that, that airborne EM and ground EM is really only effective at looking at the first 200, 300 metres down. So as most would appreciate, some of these systems don't even start until they're 500 metres below surface. So I guess, all those things need to be taken into consideration, and a lack of an EM response does not downgrade a target in the Julimar complex.
I might just pick up on that a bit further, Alex, because a few people have asked about your exploration strategy to the north along the corridor, and you have covered off on that. But I suppose, given the blind nature of this zone and what you've just said about the absence of an EM signature, are there any other exploration technologies out there that could help? And does it change your approach in any way moving forward?
Well, the other technique that we're applying at the moment is seismic. We've shot a couple of seismic lines there, one just on the northern part of Gonneville and one, about 2 kilometres north. So we're hoping there that we can sort of broadly image the sort of macro scale features of Gonneville, and that'll give us a better indication, what ultimately is the system doing at depth. So that's, taking our exploration to the next iteration. You're talking drilling, quite deep holes below, the current level of investigation. So that's something that we think has application in terms of, our broader geological understanding. In terms of other techniques, I mean, it's probably IP. Some people would be familiar with used in detecting sulfides, but the issue we have is there are a lot of other sulfides in the system. So I don't necessarily think that IP would refine our targeting approach that we're using at present. But I think definitely once we've got more of a geochemical database, lithogeochemistry, which is just looking in a bit more detail at the geochemistry of the geology, that's certainly something that we're investigating a lot and being used. A lot of that geology that we saw with the Gonneville intrusion itself is being mapped out by lithogeochemistry. So those tools applied, once we've got a bit more data to work with, can help us vector to potentially more interesting parts of the succession.
Excellent.
One more comment on relation to that, Nick. I mentioned how these types of mineral complexes develop over 5, 10, 20-year periods. Is worth reiterating that that they're not just immediately obvious as to where to drill, where to find mineralization. It is a very extensive, systematic approach we're taking, acknowledging that that it's likely to unfold over those sorts of time horizons. That we can see years and years worth of work already to fully get a broad understanding of the Julimar complex. And then obviously if we do have success, further success, then that obviously only adds to that time horizon.
Fantastic. Couple of final questions from our audience online. Graham Cartwright asks, how big would the project need to be to justify an integrated facility through to end metal?
I like the way you think, Graham. Look, it's one step at a time for us at the moment. I think there's no point sort of going right to the end point at this stage. Looking all the way downstream, but we are making steps, iterative steps into the midstream. So I guess the first obvious place that the work is focusing on is basically, instead of selling a nickel concentrate to a smelter, can we process that nickel concentrate and generate a battery precursor product? So that has a twofold benefit. The first benefit is that we get much higher payabilities on metals in a product like that. The second benefit is obviously the CO2, the carbon intensity of the metal, reduces significantly if you can take out the smelting stage. So that's the first sort of step for us, is to look in the midstream space. Like I mentioned, the Commonwealth and a lot of government agencies are very interested in working with us for obvious reasons to look further, and that's likely to evolve over the coming years. It's obviously the complexity involved as you do more and more processing is something to obviously manage. So we're looking to sort of approach it systematically from I guess the upstream end, progressively working downstream.
Fantastic. And just a final quick one from Des Moriarty. He says, given the scale of the project and the volume of drilling, is it time to set up your own assay lab?
Yeah, it is a bit of a painful wait time. Understand that. I guess it does fluctuate a little bit. I don't think we'll be there in terms of justifying our own lab. But yeah, look, I think that we have to remember we're only an hour or so outside of Perth and outside of the distance from the lab. So we also put a lot of volume through that lab. So look, I think in short, that we are a big player in the exploration context, but we have to be realistic about sort of what we can achieve. So I think for the time being, we're not envisaging going outside of the existing labs we use.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alex. I think we've covered all the topics and all the questions pretty comprehensively. So I might just quickly hand back to you for a couple of closing comments before we finish up.
Yeah, thanks, Nick, and obviously appreciate everyone's interest and in what is a very unique opportunity in the market. Like Chalice as a company, obviously at a very exciting stage. Our Gonneville discovery, the first discovery was made in a very challenging time in the markets in March of 2020. And look, we're back in another challenging part of the market cycle, but look, I guess we are focused on really, working out what Julemar is and maximising the value of it for our shareholders. So I would say, to reiterate we've got something that is very unique, and we're working very systematically and very thoroughly to get an understanding of it. It clearly is going to continue to grow. The project is a standout opportunity in the exploration space. So thanks everyone, obviously, for joining, and thanks Nicholas for hosting.
Thanks very much. Thank you to Alex, to Kevin, and to Matt for making yourselves available this morning. That was a fantastic session. Thank you to everyone who joined. We had record numbers online and some fantastic questions. So with that, I wish everyone a great Friday and a good weekend. Thank you. Have a great day.